For years, this trail was treated as a rite of passage, a place where confidence mattered more than caution, not in public announcements or warning signs, but in how the people who know it best began to move, pause, and sometimes choose not to go forward at all. What appears unchanged to visitors is now approached with calculation behind the scenes, shaped by patterns most hikers never notice and decisions that are never explained out loud. A trail managed like an incident scene. In Zion National Park, the route to Angel's Landing begins as ordinary foot travel. It starts in Zion Canyon, near the grotto, where pavement, shuttle stops, and short connector paths feed into the West Rim Trail. The grade turns steady early, and the first miles are mostly sheltered by canyon walls. The trail is maintained, signed, and heavily used. The exposure that people associate with Angel's Landing is not immediate. It is concentrated later, near a junction called Scout Lookout, where the route to Angel's Landing separates from the main West Rim Trail. The National Park Service treats the section beyond Scout Lookout as a controlled hike. Since April 1st, 2022, hikers have needed a permit to continue past Scout Lookout toward Angel's Landing. The permit system is managed through recreation.gov with seasonal and day-before lotteries, and the park provides time windows to spread use across the day. The permit requirement is not framed as a challenge or a badge. It is written as crowd management and safety policy, created after years when the chain-assisted spine of the route became a choke point in peak season. That permit boundary also changes how rangers work the area. Patrols can no longer assume that everyone at the chains is simply part of the general flow. Rangers can check compliance, track estimated numbers, and reduce the kind of shoulder-to-shoulder movement that turns a narrow ledge into a delay line. When use is regulated, the trail stops behaving like an uncontrolled queue. It begins to behave like a place with a gate, even though the gate is digital and the terrain is open rock. The environment that holds the trail is not stable in the way visitors often expect from a finished route. Zion is a steep canyon system cut into sandstone and layered rock, and it produces rockfall without warning. On November 14th, 2023, a rockfall near Weeping Rock temporarily stopped traffic on Zion Canyon Scenic Drive, and the Weeping Rock shuttle stop, parking area, and trail were closed, while park staff assessed the area. Even without injuries, that kind of closure sets the tone for how rangers describe hazards in the main canyon. It is not the same as a muddy section or a seasonal puddle. It is a problem that can't be solved by stepping around it. The West Rim corridor sees a different set of routine medical events. Dehydration and heat illness dominate summer logs, but winter incidents occur as well, including cardiac events that look sudden from the outside and ordinary from a responder's point of view. On January 26, 2024, the park reported an unresponsive hiker on the West Rim Trail near Scout Lookout. Rangers responded on foot with medical equipment, including an AED and a heart monitor. Visitors with medical training were already performing CPR when the rangers arrived, and the hiker was later pronounced dead. The location matters because Scout Lookout is treated as a decision point. It is where people stop, rest, and decide whether to continue. A medical emergency there is not in a remote basin. It is on a heavily traveled segment where help still arrives by hiking, not by driving. Older incident records show how long that pattern has existed. In the National Park Service Morning Report Archive for Zion, rescues on or near Angel's Landing appear regularly, with details that read like standard field notes rather than dramatic retellings. On Saturday, June 5th, 2004, rangers rescued an injured hiker from Angel's Landing after a knee injury about 200 yards past Scout Lookout. The report states that the group called 911, rangers and a medic hiked in at night, and the decision was made to spend the night on top rather than attempt a larger technical operation in the dark. The next morning, a short-haul helicopter operation was used, with the Grand Canyon National Park helicopter requested to assist. The patient was flown to the Zion Lodge area and transferred to an ambulance for transport to Dixie Regional Medical Center in St. George, Utah. The narrative is plain, but it shows the operational reality. Once someone cannot move on that terrain, the safest option for responders can be waiting, not forcing an extraction. The same archive includes fatal events described in the same restrained language. On Friday, June 25th, 2004, a 14-year-old Boy Scout from Long Beach, California, fell to his death from Angel's Landing. Rangers and a technical team were flown to the top and descended by ropes to reach the location after the body was spotted from the air. The report notes the vertical drop at the location as approximately 1,000 feet, and states that the Washington County Sheriff's Office investigated in cooperation with the National Park Service. Even in a fatality, the writing stays procedural because the report is built to record actions taken, not to interpret what the fall means. Those reports explain why experienced staff sometimes speak about the route in terms of workload rather than scenery. A trail can be beautiful and still consume hours of staffing when something minor turns immobilizing. A sprained ankle on a flat path is slow. The same injury on a steep rock spine, with drop-offs and chains, becomes a night operation, a coordination problem, and a risk calculation for responders. The work is not limited to technical skill. It includes deciding when to wait, when to short haul, and when to divert personnel from other parts of the canyon. Zion's public-facing safety pages reflect the same logic. The park states that rockfall hazards occur throughout the park, especially near cliffs, and gives direct instructions for what to do if a rockfall occurs. The phrasing is not theatrical. It treats rockfall as ordinary enough to require a standard response, like lightning protocol or flash flood guidance. On a canyon trail system, ordinary does not mean rare. It means planned for. The permit page for Angel's Landing adds another quiet detail. It does not promise that permits make the hike safe. It emphasizes planning, time windows, and the reality that permits are only for the section beyond Scout Lookout. People can still hike to Scout Lookout without a permit. In practice, that means rangers can still encounter large groups at the decision point, including hikers who arrive without permits and stop there, as well as hikers who do have permits and continue. The workload does not disappear, it changes shape. In the day-to-day management of the trail, there is a difference between avoiding a place and working it carefully. Rangers still patrol the corridor. Search and rescue still responds when a call comes in. What changes over time is how the route is treated in briefings, staffing plans, and informal guidance to seasonal employees. A trail that repeatedly produces late evacuations and cliffside operations can become a location that staff approach with less casual movement. Time gets budgeted differently, radios get checked earlier, small decisions become standard, including whether to proceed during poor weather and how long to remain in exposed areas during rockfall risk periods. By the time a visitor reaches Scout Lookout, the trail has already passed through several layers of that management system: shuttles, signage, rangers at information desks, permit checks, and warnings that are written as plain instructions. The chains section is only one piece of the route's identity. The other piece is administrative, built from incident history, closures, and routine medical calls that happen close to the same junction, year after year. The permit boundary as a working line. Scout Lookout sits on a broad sandstone shelf at roughly 5,400 feet above sea level. It is not marked by a fence or a gate. The boundary is administrative rather than physical, defined by signage and by the permit requirement that begins where the Angel's Landing route leaves the West Rim Trail. Hikers arriving there often stop for water or rest because the climb from the canyon floor includes a long sequence of switchbacks known as Walter's Wiggles. That physical pause is one reason the location functions as a control point. People naturally gather there, even without being told to. From a management perspective, Scout Lookout allows park staff to separate two different kinds of trail use. The West Rim Trail continues north toward Cabin Spring and Lava Point and does not require a permit. The Angel's Landing route, which follows a narrow sandstone fin with fixed chains, does. Rangers do not treat the boundary as symbolic. They use it to decide how many people can occupy the exposed section at one time and to limit opposing traffic on the chains, which historically created delays and instability when hikers tried to pass each other. Permit verification is not continuous throughout the day. During peak months, checks often occur in the morning and early afternoon, when most permit holders are scheduled to hike. Rangers typically ask to see a printed permit or a digital confirmation on a phone. The interaction is brief. There is no orientation talk unless someone asks for clarification. If a hiker does not have a permit, the ranger directs them to stop at Scout Lookout and return the same way they came. The exchange is procedural rather than disciplinary. The permit system itself is divided into time blocks. Morning permits, midday permits, and afternoon permits are issued separately, with a smaller number of day-before permits released each afternoon. The structure reflects how the park tracks use patterns. Morning permits correspond to cooler temperatures and higher demand. Afternoon permits exist to distribute use into later hours, even though heat and weather can change conditions quickly. Rangers are aware of these windows and will sometimes ask permit holders which time block they are assigned, especially if someone arrives early or late. Enforcement relies on visibility more than confrontation. Rangers do not pursue hikers who have already moved beyond the boundary unless there is a clear safety issue. The expectation is that the permit system shapes behavior before people arrive at the trailhead. Shuttle drivers, visitor center staff, and signage along the West Rim Trail all reference the requirement. By the time hikers reach Scout Lookout, most already know whether they are allowed to continue. The boundary works because it is reinforced upstream, not because it is aggressively guarded on site. Scout Lookout also functions as a medical assessment area. Because it is reachable by a maintained trail without technical climbing, it becomes a practical place to stop someone who is overheating, injured, or fatigued. Rangers carry basic medical gear and can evaluate whether a person should continue, rest, or turn back. In some cases, hikers who hold valid permits are advised not to proceed based on conditions or physical signs. These decisions are not recorded as violations, they are logged as contacts, similar to other preventive interactions throughout the park. Weather plays a role in how strictly the boundary is treated. During high winds, rain, or the approach of thunderstorms, rangers may temporarily advise all hikers to stop at Scout Lookout, regardless of permit status. The chains section becomes more dangerous when wet, and lightning risk increases along exposed ridges. These advisories are communicated verbally and through posted alerts, but they are not always accompanied by formal closures. The approach allows flexibility without requiring a full shutdown of the trail system. Historical incident data shows why this flexibility exists. Before the permit system, crowding at the chains was a frequent factor in rescues and near misses. People waited on narrow ledges, sometimes standing still for extended periods. Others attempted to turn around mid-route when conditions changed, creating opposing movement in a space designed for single-file travel. The permit boundary does not eliminate exposure, but it reduces congestion, which in turn reduces the number of situations that require ranger intervention. Scout Lookout's location also affects response time when something goes wrong beyond the boundary. Rangers stationed there can respond upward or downward depending on the call. If a hiker slips on the chains or experiences a medical issue on the spine of Angel's Landing, Scout Lookout becomes the nearest staging area for equipment and personnel. Short-haul helicopter operations, when used, still rely on ground teams to package patients and manage bystanders. The boundary simplifies that process by limiting the number of people in the immediate area. The physical features of Scout Lookout make it suitable for this role. The rock surface is wide enough for small groups to sit without blocking the main trail. There is space to lay out gear and for helicopters to hover nearby if conditions allow. Unlike the chains section, there is no immediate drop-off at the resting area itself. That difference is subtle but important. It allows rangers to work without the constant need to manage foot placement or tether themselves to fixed protection. Visitor behavior at the boundary varies by season. In spring and fall, when temperatures are moderate, more hikers arrive with permits and intend to continue. Rangers report more voluntary turnarounds, even among permitted hikers, especially during midday hours. Scout Lookout becomes a place where people reassess plans based on physical feedback rather than ambition. The permit system does not force that reassessment, but it concentrates it at a predictable location. The boundary also affects how rangers communicate risk. Instead of repeating warnings along the entire route, they can deliver concise information at a single point. Statements about wind, storms, or recent incidents are given in plain language. There is no attempt to persuade or dramatize. The information is presented as current conditions, similar to a weather report. Visitors are expected to decide how to proceed within the limits already set by the permit. From an administrative standpoint, Scout Lookout serves as a data point. Rangers can estimate compliance rates, observe peak arrival times, and note how long hikers linger before continuing or turning back. These observations inform future permit allocations and staffing decisions. The boundary is not static policy. It is adjusted through daily use, guided by what happens at that shelf of rock over months and years. The presence of the boundary has also changed informal ranger habits. Some staff choose not to cross into the chains section unless necessary, particularly during busy periods. This is not avoidance in the sense of fear or refusal. It is workload management. By staying at Scout Lookout, rangers can monitor many hikers at once, respond quickly to emerging issues, and avoid adding themselves to congestion on the exposed route. The boundary allows them to work from a stable position rather than inside the narrowest part of the trail. By late afternoon, when permit windows close, Scout Lookout quiets. Most remaining hikers are returning from the chains or continuing on the West Rim Trail. Rangers often conclude permit checks earlier than the last scheduled window if conditions deteriorate. or staffing shifts. The boundary remains in place even when no one is actively checking it, because its function is shared between policy, terrain, and routine behavior. Routine incidents logged without public attention. Daily incident activity on the West Rim Trail rarely matches the scale that visitors imagine when they hear the word rescue. Most entries recorded by Zion National Park rangers describe brief contacts, short assists, and medical checks that resolve without transport. These events are logged through internal reporting systems and summarized in shift notes rather than press releases. They accumulate quietly and shape how the trail is staffed and supervised. Heat-related illness appears frequently in summer reports. The canyon floor can exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit, while higher elevations remain only slightly cooler. Rangers document hikers stopping at Scout Lookout or along Walter's Wiggles with nausea, dizziness, or muscle cramps. Treatment usually involves water, shade, electrolyte replacement, and rest. In many cases, hikers recover enough to descend under their own power. These interactions are time-consuming but routine, and they rarely escalate beyond basic care. Dehydration incidents are often connected to timing rather than distance. Afternoon hikers with permits sometimes underestimate the heat retained by the canyon walls. Rangers note that many arrive at Scout Lookout later than planned, having spent longer than expected on the initial climb. The reports describe slowed pace, confusion about remaining distance, an occasional refusal to turn back until symptoms become obvious. Once symptoms appear, the decision to stop is usually mutual rather than enforced. Ankle and knee injuries are another recurring category. The sandstone steps and uneven rock surfaces create conditions where missteps are common, especially during descent. Rangers record sprains caused by slips on smooth rock and fatigue-related stumbles on the switchbacks. Most of these injuries allow for assisted hiking, where a ranger walks with the injured person and controls the pace. Only a small portion require litter transport, and fewer still require helicopter assistance. Medical calls involving cardiac issues appear intermittently throughout the year. These are not clustered in any one season. Rangers document chest pain, shortness of breath, and loss of consciousness in hikers of varying ages. Response protocols are standardized: CPR when indicated, AED deployment, and coordination with Washington County Emergency Medical Services. Outcomes vary, and the reports focus on actions taken rather than prognosis. These incidents reinforce the decision to keep Scout Lookout accessible and staffed when possible. Lost or disoriented hikers are less common on the Angel's Landing route itself than on less defined trails elsewhere in the park. The West Rim Trail is well marked, and traffic flow provides visual cues. When hikers do stray, it is often due to side exploration or stopping to rest off the main path. Rangers document short searches lasting minutes rather than hours. The resolution usually involves verbal direction rather than physical assistance. Rockfall reports are treated differently from personal injury. Rangers log observed rock movement, fresh debris on the trail, and audible cracking from cliff faces. These entries trigger assessments by geological staff and may lead to temporary advisories or closures. The reporting language avoids prediction. It notes location, size of debris, and immediate effects on the trail surface. Follow-up actions are recorded separately, emphasizing observation over interpretation. Weather-related incidents include sudden storms that produce slick surfaces on the chains. Rangers note that even light rain can change traction on exposed sandstone. Reports describe hikers freezing in place, unable to move comfortably forward or backward. In these cases, rangers often position themselves to provide verbal guidance and physical spacing rather than hands-on assistance. The goal is to restore controlled movement without adding congestion. Crowd management issues continue to appear even with the permit system in place. Rangers document moments when hikers bunch up at narrow points or pause for extended periods. These entries are not disciplinary. They describe adjustments made, such as spacing groups or redirecting foot traffic temporarily. The reports emphasize prevention, noting how small changes in flow reduce the likelihood of slips or panic. Night operations occur occasionally but are not the norm. When they do happen, the reports detail headlamp use, reduced visibility, and slower movement. Rangers prefer to avoid technical operations after dark when possible. In several documented cases, injured hikers were stabilized and sheltered overnight rather than moved immediately. These decisions are framed as risk reduction for both the patient and the responders. The cumulative effect of these routine incidents influences staffing patterns. Rangers assigned to Zion Canyon are briefed on expected call types before shifts begin. Equipment loads reflect historical needs, including extra water, medical supplies, and communication gear. The trail itself does not change, but the way it is worked does, based on years of logged experience. These records also affect training. Seasonal rangers are taught to recognize early signs of heat illness and altitude fatigue. They practice patient packaging and litter movement in non-emergency settings. The training emphasizes consistency rather than heroics. Most situations encountered on the trail resolve through calm assessment and measured response. Public awareness of these incidents remains low because they rarely disrupt park operations in visible ways. Trails remain open, shuttles continue running. Visitors passing by may notice a ranger kneeling beside a hiker or speaking quietly with a group, but they are unlikely to know the details. The park does not broadcast each event because the volume would overwhelm any meaningful message. The absence of publicity does not imply absence of impact. Each logged incident contributes to an internal picture of how the trail behaves under different conditions. Patterns emerge over time, such as increased calls during heat waves or after permit release times. These patterns inform decisions that visitors may never associate with safety, including where to place water reminders or when to adjust permit numbers. Routine incident logs also serve a legal and administrative function. They document ranger presence, actions taken, and compliance with established protocols. In the event of serious injury or fatality, these records provide context. They show what was typical on the day in question and how staff responded to conditions as they developed. By design, these reports avoid narrative flourish. They read as sequences of observations and responses. This style reflects the purpose of the documentation, which is to inform operations rather than to explain meaning. Over time, the accumulation of these quiet records becomes one of the most influential forces shaping how the trail is managed. Environmental conditions that alter risk without warning. Zion National Park sits at the intersection of desert climate and high-relief terrain. Elevation changes of several thousand feet occur within a short horizontal distance, and those changes influence temperature, wind, and moisture in ways that are not always apparent from the canyon floor. On the West Rim Trail and the route to Angel's Landing, conditions can differ markedly from what visitors experience at trailheads or shuttle stops. Rangers account for these differences during daily briefings, even when forecasts appear stable. Temperature variation is one of the most persistent factors affecting the trail. Summer air temperatures in Zion Canyon regularly exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit, while higher elevations along the West Rim may be slightly cooler but still dry and exposed. The sandstone absorbs heat throughout the day and releases it slowly, which means surfaces remain warm well into the evening. Rangers note that hikers often underestimate this retained heat, particularly on the return descent, when fatigue reduces tolerance for thermal stress. Cold weather introduces a different set of concerns. Winter temperatures at Scout Lookout and above can drop below freezing overnight. Moisture from melting snow or light precipitation can refreeze on shaded rock, creating thin layers of ice that are difficult to see. Rangers document these conditions as verglas, a term used to describe clear ice on rock surfaces. Even when the main trail appears dry, isolated patches of ice can persist for days, especially on north-facing sections. Wind behavior along the Angel's Landing spine is influenced by topography. The narrow fin channels airflow, sometimes producing sudden gusts that differ from conditions below. Rangers describe days when winds are calm at the grotto but strong enough at elevation to affect balance. These gusts are not always sustained. They can arrive in short bursts, making them harder to anticipate. Permit checks do not eliminate wind exposure, and advisories are based on observation rather than fixed thresholds. Precipitation patterns in Zion are seasonal but unpredictable in timing. Summer monsoon storms can form rapidly in the afternoon, bringing rain, lightning, and localized wind. The exposed nature of the chains section increases lightning risk, even when storms are distant. Rangers monitor cloud development and may advise hikers to delay or turn back based on visual cues rather than radar alone. The guidance is often brief and practical, reflecting the need to communicate quickly at decision points. Rain changes the physical properties of sandstone. When dry, the rock provides reliable friction. When wet, it becomes slick, particularly on polished sections shaped by heavy foot traffic. Rangers report that even light rain can reduce traction enough to slow movement significantly. In these conditions, hikers may grip chains more tightly and move cautiously, which increases congestion. The effect is cumulative rather than immediate, altering flow rather than stopping it outright. Snowfall is less frequent but still relevant. When snow accumulates on the West Rim, it can obscure trail edges and steps. Rangers document cases where hikers continue upward in light snow without traction devices, believing conditions will improve higher up. In reality, snow often persists longer at elevation. Decisions to proceed or turn back are influenced by how clearly the trail remains visible rather than by depth alone. Flash flooding is a known hazard in Zion, though it affects side canyons more directly than the Angel's Landing route. Even so, heavy rain can send water across sections of the trail, carrying sand and debris. Rangers log these events as surface changes rather than floods, noting where sediment alters footing. These changes may last only hours, but they can surprise hikers who expect consistent conditions. Sun exposure remains constant, regardless of season. The route beyond Scout Lookout offers little shade, and reflective rock surfaces intensify ultraviolet exposure. Rangers frequently remind hikers to use sun protection, but compliance varies. Reports mention sunburn and heat rash as secondary issues that compound dehydration and fatigue. These are rarely primary reasons for rescue, but they contribute to overall stress on the body. Altitude plays a subtle role. While the elevation gain to Angel's Landing is modest compared to alpine environments, some hikers experience mild altitude-related symptoms, including headache and shortness of breath. Rangers do not classify these as altitude sickness in most cases, but they note that physical exertion combined with heat can produce similar effects. These symptoms often resolve with rest and hydration at Scout Lookout. Seasonal daylight variation influences timing decisions. In winter, shorter days compress hiking windows, increasing the likelihood of late descents. Rangers document instances where hikers misjudge turnaround times and find themselves descending in low light. Headlamp use is common but not universal. Reduced visibility affects depth perception on exposed sections, even when the trail itself is dry. Environmental conditions also affect ranger operations. Wind can limit helicopter use, and storms can delay response times. Rangers plan for these constraints by positioning staff strategically and by carrying equipment suited to variable conditions. The goal is to adapt without drawing attention to the adaptation itself. Visitors may not notice when a ranger alters patrol routes based on weather, but those decisions are routine. The interaction between environment and human behavior is central to trail management. Conditions do not cause incidents in isolation. They interact with fatigue, timing, and expectation. Rangers record environmental factors alongside incident details to capture this interaction. Over time, patterns emerge, such as increased calls during the first hot weeks of summer or during unseasonal cold snaps in spring. These environmental variables are not presented to visitors as dramatic hazards. Information is shared through signage, brief conversations, and posted alerts. The language remains neutral, focusing on current conditions rather than hypothetical outcomes. Rangers avoid predictions beyond the immediate future, relying instead on observation and experience. Despite this, environmental shifts remain one of the least predictable elements of the trail. They can change between the time a hiker boards a shuttle and the moment they reach Scout Lookout. The park's approach acknowledges this uncertainty without attempting to eliminate it. The trail remains open when conditions allow, and responsibility is distributed between management and individual judgment. When experience does not guarantee control, many hikers who reach Angel's Landing have prior experience on exposed trails. Rangers regularly encounter visitors who identify themselves as climbers, long-distance hikers, military veterans, or search and rescue volunteers from other regions. These individuals often speak confidently about their background while resting at Scout Lookout. Their experience is not dismissed by staff, but it does not alter how the trail behaves under specific conditions. Incident records show that familiarity with risk does not consistently prevent loss of balance, misjudgment of timing, or medical issues. Rangers document that experienced hikers sometimes move faster than the average visitor during the initial ascent. This can shorten rest periods and reduce hydration frequency. On the West Rim Trail, steady climbing without breaks leads to elevated heart rate and early fatigue, particularly in heat. Reports note that some experienced hikers interpret these signals as normal exertion and continue upward without adjusting pace. By the time symptoms intensify, they may already be committed to descending rather than resting further uphill. Military background appears occasionally in incident narratives, usually mentioned by companions rather than by the individual involved. These references are descriptive rather than explanatory. Rangers record them alongside age, location, and observed symptoms. There is no indication that such background reduces the likelihood of needing assistance. In some cases, the expectation of personal endurance delays a request for help, which can complicate response timing. Climbers and technical hikers present a different pattern. They often express comfort with exposure and chains, but the Angel's Landing route is not treated as a technical climb. The chains are designed for balance assistance, not for load bearing or fall arrest. Rangers note instances where climbers rely on grip strength rather than foot placement, increasing fatigue in the forearms and hands. When grip strength diminishes, movement slows, and congestion can build behind them. Experience with other national parks does not always translate directly. Rangers document comments from hikers who compare Angel's Landing to routes in Yosemite, Rocky Mountain National Park, or Grand Canyon National Park. While these areas share elements of exposure, the specific combination of narrow width, opposing traffic, and polished sandstone creates conditions that are distinct. Familiarity can encourage assumptions that prove inaccurate on this particular terrain. Guided groups are rare on Angel's Landing due to permit limitations, but when they occur, incident reports show mixed outcomes. Guides often manage pacing effectively, but clients with prior experience may resist instructions to rest or turn back. Rangers describe situations where group dynamics complicate decision-making, with experienced individuals influencing less experienced members. These interactions are noted factually, without commentary on leadership quality. Search and rescue professionals visiting the park on personal trips appear occasionally in reports. In these cases, rangers note that the individuals often assist others before seeking help themselves. While this can be beneficial in early response, it also exposes them to additional risk. Rangers emphasize that professional training does not eliminate environmental hazards, and the reports reflect this by listing injuries sustained while assisting others. Age is recorded consistently in incident documentation, but experience level is not always correlated with age. Rangers encounter young climbers with extensive technical backgrounds and older hikers with decades of trail experience. Both groups appear in injury and medical logs. The data does not suggest that years of experience provide immunity from slips or sudden medical events. It suggests only that experienced hikers may approach risk differently. Decision-making at Scout Lookout highlights this pattern. Rangers note that inexperienced hikers are more likely to ask questions or express uncertainty. Experienced hikers are more likely to make decisions independently, sometimes without seeking updated information about conditions. When conditions change rapidly, such as increasing wind or approaching storms, this independence can result in delayed responses to advisories. Incident reports also include cases where experienced hikers misjudge crowd dynamics. Prior to the permit system, some individuals attempted to move quickly through congested sections, increasing instability. Even after permits were introduced, rangers note occasional impatience among hikers accustomed to controlling their pace. These moments are recorded as flow issues rather than behavioral violations. Medical incidents involving experienced hikers often mirror those of the general population. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, and cardiac symptoms appear regardless of background. Rangers do not attribute outcomes to experience level in their reports. Instead, they focus on observable signs and treatment steps. This approach reinforces the idea that physical response to environment takes precedence over prior skill sets. The concept of control appears frequently in informal ranger discussions, but rarely in formal documentation. Control refers to the ability to manage movement, pace, and decision-making under variable conditions. Experience can contribute to control, but it does not ensure it. Rangers document that loss of control often occurs during transitions, such as shifting from ascent to descent or adjusting to sudden weather changes. Equipment choices among experienced hikers vary. Some carry minimal gear, relying on familiarity and confidence. Others bring extensive equipment, including helmets and gloves, which are not required on the trail. Rangers note that additional gear does not always improve safety and can sometimes restrict movement or increase fatigue. These observations are recorded without judgment. The permit system has not eliminated incidents involving experienced hikers. Rangers continue to respond to calls where the individuals involved had permits, preparation, and prior exposure experience. The difference lies in frequency and crowding rather than in the nature of incidents themselves. Experience shapes how hikers interpret risk, but it does not remove the underlying variables. From an operational standpoint, rangers treat all incidents the same, regardless of background. Response protocols do not change based on experience claims. Medical assessment, environmental evaluation, and extraction decisions follow established guidelines. Reports reflect this consistency, listing actions taken rather than personal narratives. Over time, The accumulation of these records challenges the assumption that certain groups are inherently safer on the trail. The data suggests that Angel's Landing imposes its own conditions, independent of who steps onto it. Experience influences approach, but does not dictate outcome. Rangers continue to log these events quietly, allowing patterns to emerge without assigning meaning beyond what is observed. Sections rangers hesitate to enter without cause. Within Zion National Park, ranger patrol routes are not distributed evenly across all terrain. Certain areas of the Angel's Landing route are approached selectively, not because they are forbidden, but because routine presence there increases operational risk without improving safety outcomes. These sections are known internally through experience rather than signage. They are defined by exposure, limited movement options, and the difficulty of reversing direction once entered. The most notable of these areas is the narrow spine beyond Scout Lookout, where the chains are anchored directly into the sandstone. This section is less than half a mile long, but its width narrows to just a few feet in places. Rangers do not patrol this stretch continuously. Instead, they monitor it from fixed points above and below. Entry is typically reserved for active responses, permit verification when congestion is low, or directed safety interventions during specific conditions. Movement along the chains requires deliberate pacing. Rangers note that once committed to the spine, stopping options are limited. Entering the section without a clear purpose can place staff into the same constrained movement pattern as visitors, reducing their ability to respond elsewhere. For this reason, rangers often wait at Scout Lookout or at the upper junction until a specific need arises. Wind exposure increases significantly along this stretch. Reports describe sudden lateral gusts that affect balance even for experienced staff. Rangers carry radios, medical gear, and sometimes ropes, all of which can shift weight distribution. Entering the chains section under windy conditions increases the chance of equipment interference with footing. As a result, rangers document wind observations carefully before deciding to proceed. Another area of limited routine access lies near the summit plateau of Angel's Landing. While the summit itself is relatively broad, the approaches funnel hikers into narrow corridors. Rangers note that crowd density can change rapidly here as groups arrive from both directions. Standing in these corridors for extended periods increases congestion and elevates risk for everyone involved. Rangers therefore avoid remaining stationary in these zones unless managing a specific issue. Vertical exposure also affects communication. Radios can experience intermittent signal disruption along the rock fin due to terrain interference. Rangers document locations where communication drops or requires repositioning. Entering these areas without a response objective can complicate coordination, particularly if conditions deteriorate. Maintaining reliable communication is a priority, and patrol routes are planned accordingly. Historical incident logs show that many rescues originate from slips or medical events in precisely these constrained sections. Rangers responding to such calls must often move against the normal flow of traffic. This requires coordination with other staff to manage spacing and prevent additional incidents. Entering these areas casually increases the chance that a ranger becomes part of the flow rather than an external control point. During high-use periods prior to the permit system, rangers reported difficulty exiting the chains section once inside. Congestion sometimes required staff to wait extended periods before reversing direction. These delays reduced coverage elsewhere in the canyon. Although permits have reduced traffic volume, the structural limitation remains. Rangers still factor potential exit delays into their decisions to enter. Surface conditions also influence access. Polished sandstone along the chains shows wear from decades of foot traffic. Even dry surfaces can become slick when dust accumulates. Entering these areas for non-essential reasons increases exposure to these variables without corresponding benefit. Rangers also consider visitor perception. A uniformed presence in the most exposed sections can unintentionally signal either reassurance or alarm, depending on context. Without a clear reason, this presence may distract hikers or cause them to alter movement patterns. Rangers therefore limit visibility in these sections unless actively addressing an issue. Training exercises occasionally occur in these areas, but they are scheduled during low-use periods. Rangers document these sessions separately from visitor interactions. Training entries emphasize route familiarity, anchor points, and movement techniques rather than patrol. The distinction reinforces that routine presence and technical access are treated differently. Upper sections near the summit also present logistical challenges for medical response. Rangers document that initial stabilization often occurs where the patient falls, but movement is delayed until conditions allow. Entering these zones without cause increases the likelihood that staff would need to self-extract under similar constraints. Weather amplifies all of these factors. Light rain, ice, or wind can turn manageable exposure into a controlled access situation. Rangers record that even experienced staff may choose not to enter these sections when conditions shift unexpectedly. Decisions are made conservatively, prioritizing the ability to respond elsewhere over maintaining constant presence. The avoidance of these sections during routine patrol does not indicate neglect. Instead, it reflects an understanding of how risk accumulates in constrained terrain. Rangers position themselves where they can observe, communicate, and intervene efficiently. This approach extends to volunteer groups and partner agencies. Search and rescue teams from outside the park are briefed on access expectations before deployment. They are advised that certain sections are entered only when necessary and with clear objectives. Coordination reduces the chance of overcrowding responders in the most exposed areas. The park's internal guidance does not label these zones as off-limits. It frames them as areas requiring justification for entry. Rangers document the reasoning behind entries in incident reports, creating a record that informs future operations. Over time, these patterns influence how staff speak about the trail. Phrases like "no reason to be on the spine right now" appear in informal communication. They reflect a shared understanding rather than an official directive. The trail remains open, but access by staff is purposeful rather than habitual. Visitors rarely notice this absence. From their perspective, the trail appears staffed and monitored. The distinction lies in where rangers choose to stand and move. By staying out of the most constrained sections unless needed, rangers preserve their ability to respond effectively when conditions demand it. Calls that end before search and rescue begins. Not every incident on the Angel's Landing route progresses to a formal search and rescue response. Rangers document a larger number of calls that resolve before additional teams are activated. These events are recorded as assists, advisories, or medical contacts, depending on the circumstances. They occur across seasons and are shaped by timing, communication, and early recognition of limits. Many of these calls begin with a radio report from a ranger already in the area. A hiker may sit down abruptly, complain of dizziness, or show signs of confusion. The first action is assessment, not mobilization. Rangers check vital signs, ask about water intake, and observe gait. If symptoms improve with rest and fluids, the situation is logged and closed. No additional resources are requested, and the interaction ends quietly. Phone calls from visitors also initiate early interventions. Dispatch receives reports from companions who are uncertain whether to continue. These calls often include incomplete information, such as vague locations or uncertain symptoms. Rangers respond by hiking to the last known point or by contacting the caller again for clarification. In many cases, the hikers have already begun descending by the time contact is made. The report reflects the initial concern rather than an ongoing emergency. Self-correction plays a significant role in these outcomes. Rangers note that many hikers recognize early signs of trouble and choose to turn around. Fatigue, anxiety, or weather changes prompt decisions that prevent escalation. These choices are not always dramatic. They involve stopping, sitting, and reassessing. Rangers record the moment of contact, but not the internal decision-making that led to it. Permit enforcement contributes indirectly to early resolution. When rangers check permits at Scout Lookout, they often observe physical condition and preparedness. If a hiker appears overheated or unsteady, the ranger may recommend a break or advise against continuing. These advisories are documented as contacts, not incidents. The permit system creates a structured pause that allows for this evaluation. Weather advisories also end potential rescues before they begin. Rangers monitor cloud buildup and wind changes and communicate these observations to hikers at decision points. When conditions worsen, many hikers choose to wait or descend. The advisory itself becomes the intervention. No extraction is required because movement stops before exposure increases. Crowd dynamics influence early outcomes as well. Rangers document that congestion can prompt people to turn back when they feel uncomfortable waiting on narrow ledges. While congestion is a management challenge, it sometimes acts as a limiting factor. Hikers who might otherwise push forward reconsider when movement slows. These decisions reduce the likelihood of slips or panic. Equipment issues appear in early call logs. Broken trekking poles, loose footwear, or dropped items cause temporary stops. Rangers assist with adjustments or retrieval when safe. Once resolved, hikers often continue without further issue. These interactions are brief and do not require additional staff. Medical devices occasionally trigger early intervention. Rangers document cases involving insulin pumps, inhalers, or heart monitors. When devices malfunction or symptoms appear, hikers may choose to descend with ranger accompaniment. The decision is precautionary. The report notes assistance provided and the point of resolution, not a rescue. Communication between rangers and visitors is central to these outcomes. Rangers use clear, direct language and avoid urgency unless necessary. This tone encourages compliance without alarm. Visitors are more likely to follow advice when it is presented as information rather than instruction. Time of day affects early resolution. Morning contacts often involve pacing and hydration, while afternoon contacts relate to heat and fatigue. Evening contacts focus on daylight and timing. Rangers adjust their guidance accordingly. The reports reflect these patterns without assigning significance beyond operational relevance. Transportation logistics also matter. When hikers decide to descend early, they may worry about shuttle schedules or meeting companions. Rangers provide practical information about shuttle frequency and walking distances. This support removes barriers to turning back. The decision to stop becomes easier when logistical concerns are addressed. Some early calls involve visitors who misinterpret physical sensations as emergencies. Rangers document anxiety-related symptoms, including rapid breathing and dizziness, without other indicators. After rest and reassurance, these symptoms often resolve. The report records the interaction without diagnosing or labeling. The emphasis remains on observation and outcome. The boundary between assistance and rescue is defined by resource use. If additional teams, technical gear, or aircraft are not required, the event remains an assist. Rangers track these distinctions carefully. They inform staffing needs and training priorities without inflating incident statistics. Dispatch logs show that early resolution reduces overall workload. When potential rescues end quickly, resources remain available for other parts of the park. Rangers note that this efficiency depends on early detection and clear communication. The trail's design, with natural stopping points, supports this process. Documentation of these events is concise. Reports include time, location, symptoms, actions taken, and resolution. There is no narrative expansion. The purpose is record-keeping, not storytelling. Over time, the accumulation of these entries provides a picture of how often potential incidents resolve without escalation. Visitors are rarely aware that their decision to stop prevented a larger response. From their perspective, the day simply changed course. Rangers do not emphasize what might have happened otherwise. The focus remains on the immediate situation and its resolution. These early ending calls shape how the trail is managed. They inform where rangers stand when they check permits and how they phrase advisories. The absence of a rescue does not indicate absence of risk. It indicates that intervention occurred early enough to alter the outcome. The pattern is consistent across seasons. While the triggers vary, the mechanism remains the same. Recognition, communication, and decision-making intersect to stop escalation. The trail's incident history includes many such moments, recorded without attention and resolved without spectacle. Patterns hidden in years of incident records. Incident documentation at Zion National Park extends back decades and is maintained through multiple systems, including daily ranger logs, morning reports, and formal incident summaries. These records are not written for public release. They exist to track actions, locations, and outcomes. When reviewed over long periods, they reveal patterns that are not visible during a single season or even a single year. One consistent pattern appears in location data. A disproportionate number of incidents occur within a narrow band of elevation between the top of Walter's Wiggles and the Angel's Landing summit spur. Rangers note that this zone combines physical fatigue from sustained climbing with increased exposure and decision pressure. The records do not describe this as a danger zone. They simply show repeated entries with similar coordinates and similar contributing factors. Time of day emerges as another recurring variable. Morning incidents often involve pace miscalculation and inadequate hydration early in the climb. Midday entries shift toward heat-related symptoms and delayed turnarounds. Late afternoon records frequently reference reduced daylight and hurried descents. These time-based patterns remain consistent across years, even as permit systems and visitor numbers change. Seasonal trends appear clearly when records are aggregated. Summer logs contain a higher volume of heat, illness, and dehydration contacts. Winter and early spring entries include slips on ice and cold-related fatigue. Shoulder seasons, particularly April and October, show mixed patterns, with both heat and cold factors appearing in close succession. Rangers use these trends to anticipate call types rather than specific incidents. Incident severity does not increase in direct proportion to visitation. Records show that high-use days often generate more minor assists rather than more serious injuries. Conversely, some lower-use periods include severe incidents, including falls and medical emergencies. This pattern informs staffing decisions by emphasizing readiness over crowd size alone. Repeated references to specific trail features appear throughout the records. Polished sandstone steps, chain anchor points, and narrow ledges are mentioned frequently, not as hazards, but as context. Rangers note footing conditions, spacing issues, and movement constraints at these locations. Over time, these references accumulate into an operational map that differs from visitor maps. Weather-related entries follow predictable cycles but include notable anomalies. Sudden wind events and unforecast storms appear sporadically, interrupting otherwise stable patterns. Rangers record these events with timestamps and observed effects. The data shows that even infrequent anomalies can produce clusters of incidents within short time frames. Medical records, embedded in incident reports, reveal another pattern. Cardiac and respiratory events occur across age groups and seasons. They are not confined to periods of extreme heat or cold. Rangers note that exertion and elevation change contribute, but the records stop short of interpretation. Equipment-related issues appear less frequently but consistently. Footwear failure, dropped items, and malfunctioning devices recur across years. Rangers document these as contributing factors rather than primary causes. The pattern suggests that small equipment problems can alter movement and timing enough to require assistance. The introduction of the Angels Landing permit system in 2022 created a clear dividing line in the data. Post-permit records show reduced congestion-related entries, but continued presence of medical and environmental incidents. The volume of entries shifts, but the nature of incidents remains largely unchanged. This distinction is visible only through longitudinal review. Staffing records correlate with incident patterns. Periods with higher ranger presence at Scout Lookout show increased early interventions and fewer escalated rescues. This relationship appears repeatedly in the data. Rangers use this information to justify patrol placement rather than to predict specific outcomes. Response duration is another measurable pattern. Many incidents resolve within 30 minutes of ranger contact. Longer durations are associated with limited mobility, weather constraints, or technical terrain. The records show that time spent on scene often depends more on extraction feasibility than injury severity. Communication logs add another layer. Radio traffic increases during peak hours and during weather changes. Rangers document moments when communication delays influenced response strategy. These entries inform decisions about equipment upgrades and repeater placement rather than trail modification. Over years, certain days stand out in the records not because of catastrophic events, but because of volume. Heat waves and holiday weekends produce dense clusters of minor incidents. Rangers review these clusters to adjust messaging and staffing for similar future periods. The process is iterative and data-driven. The records also reflect changes in visitor behavior over time. Earlier entries describe higher levels of crowding and unregulated flow. Later entries reference permits, time windows, and structured pauses. The tone remains factual, but the context evolves. This evolution provides insight into how policy affects on-the-ground conditions. Fatal incidents, while rare, are documented with the same restrained structure as minor assists. Location, time, response actions, and coordination with external agencies are recorded. When these entries are reviewed alongside non-fatal incidents, patterns of location and timing still apply. Severity does not erase context. Rangers use these long-term patterns to inform training. New staff are introduced to historical trends rather than isolated stories. They learn where incidents tend to occur, when to expect certain call types, and how conditions interact. The emphasis is on preparation rather than prediction. Policy changes within the park often reference these records indirectly. Adjustments to permit numbers, signage placement, and patrol schedules align with documented patterns. The records provide justification without requiring public explanation. Visitors rarely see the cumulative effect of this data. From their perspective, the trail appears stable from year to year. The underlying management adapts quietly. guided by patterns that only become visible when years of documentation are viewed together. The records continue to grow. Each entry adds another data point, reinforcing or refining existing patterns. Rangers do not expect the trail to become predictable in a simple sense. Instead, they rely on documented repetition to reduce uncertainty where possible. These hidden patterns shape how the trail is managed today. They influence where rangers stand, how they speak to visitors, and when they intervene. The work remains grounded in observation rather than assumption, built on years of recorded experience. Why some warnings are spoken only in passing. In Zion National Park, not all safety information appears on signs or official notices. Rangers communicate some warnings informally, often during brief conversations on the trail or at natural stopping points like Scout Lookout. These statements are factual and specific, but they are not framed as directives. They are shared quietly, based on current conditions and observed patterns, rather than codified policy. Rangers rely on situational awareness to decide what to say and when. A warning delivered too broadly can lose relevance, while a targeted comment can prompt immediate adjustment. For example, a ranger might mention increasing wind to a small group preparing to continue, without issuing a general alert. The information is accurate at that moment and location. Recording it on signage would require broader justification and longer approval processes. The National Park Service maintains formal safety messaging through posted signs, brochures, and website updates. These materials address persistent hazards such as heat, rockfall, and exposure. However, they cannot capture short-term changes. Rangers fill this gap through conversation. These exchanges are logged as contacts rather than warnings, reflecting their informal status. Tone is deliberate. Rangers avoid alarmist language, even when conditions warrant caution. A statement like, "The rock is slick right now," conveys immediate relevance without implying inevitability. Visitors are more likely to accept and act on such information when it is delivered calmly. Rangers document that hikers respond better to observations than to generalized cautions. The decision to keep some warnings informal also relates to visitor flow. Overuse of signage can create visual clutter and dilute attention. Zion's canyon environment already contains numerous informational signs. Adding temporary warnings for every variable condition would overwhelm visitors. Rangers therefore prioritize direct communication at points where decisions are made. Timing matters. Warnings are often shared during moments of pause, such as rest stops or permit checks. These moments allow hikers to process information without distraction. Rangers note that delivering the same message mid-movement, especially on exposed sections, is less effective. Informal warnings are placed where they can be absorbed. Content varies by season. In summer, rangers may mention heat retention on the descent rather than the ascent. In winter, they may note shaded ice patches that are not visible from a distance. These details are specific and transient. They lose accuracy quickly as conditions change, which is why they remain spoken rather than posted. Rangers also consider the experience level of the audience. While they do not tailor warnings based on perceived competence, they adjust phrasing to ensure clarity. Technical terms are avoided unless the listener demonstrates familiarity. The goal is comprehension, not instruction. These exchanges are brief and factual. Some warnings relate to behavior rather than environments. Rangers may advise against stopping in narrow sections or remind hikers to maintain spacing on the chains. These comments address immediate flow issues. Posting such guidance permanently could imply constant enforcement, which does not reflect actual conditions. Informal delivery allows flexibility. Internal guidance supports this approach. Rangers are trained to share observations without making predictions. They avoid statements about what will happen and focus on what is currently observed. This aligns with the park's emphasis on visitor autonomy within managed risk. Informal warnings respect that balance. Documentation of these interactions is minimal. Rangers may note that information was provided, but the content is rarely transcribed verbatim. The purpose is accountability rather than record keeping. These warnings are part of routine engagement, not separate actions. Visitor response influences future communication. Rangers observe whether hikers adjust plans after receiving information. When informal warnings consistently lead to safer decisions, the approach is reinforced. If warnings are ignored, rangers may escalate to more direct advisories or consider temporary restrictions. The absence of a warning does not imply absence of risk. Rangers cannot speak to every visitor, and conditions can change between contacts. Informal warnings are supplemental, not comprehensive. They function within a broader system that includes permits, staffing, and infrastructure. Some warnings are shared repeatedly across days but still remain informal. For example, rangers may mention that afternoon winds tend to increase on certain days. While this pattern is known internally, it varies enough that formal signage is not justified. Spoken warnings allow nuance. The choice to keep warnings informal also reflects legal considerations. Official warnings carry implications for liability and enforcement. Informal observations do not require follow-up actions if visitors choose to proceed. This distinction allows rangers to communicate freely without triggering procedural obligations. Rangers coordinate informally among themselves as well. Observations about conditions are shared over radio or during shift changes. This internal communication ensures consistency in messaging. When multiple rangers note the same issue, the likelihood of broader advisories increases. Visitors sometimes misinterpret informal warnings as personal judgments. Rangers clarify that the information applies generally, not specifically to the individual. This clarification maintains trust and avoids perceived bias. The interaction remains neutral. Over time, certain phrases become common in ranger communication. These phrases are not scripted but emerge from repeated use. They are concise and descriptive, reflecting practical experience. Visitors may hear similar wording from different rangers on different days, reinforcing credibility. The effectiveness of informal warnings is reflected in incident records. Many potential issues resolve after brief conversations. Rangers note that early information often leads to voluntary turnarounds or rest breaks. These outcomes reduce the need for formal interventions. Informal warnings are not a substitute for policy. They operate within established rules and procedures. When conditions exceed acceptable thresholds, rangers implement closures or advisories through official channels. The spoken word fills the space between routine operation and formal action. This approach allows the park to remain responsive without constant structural changes. The trail environment is dynamic, and communication adapts accordingly. Informal warnings provide a mechanism for real-time adjustment that signage cannot match. Visitors may not remember every detail of these conversations. What remains is a general sense of awareness. That awareness influences behavior in subtle ways, contributing to overall safety without drawing attention to the process itself. The role of silence in ranger decision-making. Rangers working the Angel's Landing corridor make many decisions that do not result in visible action. These choices are shaped by observation, timing, and an understanding of how intervention can alter behavior. Silence, in this context, does not indicate absence. It reflects a deliberate decision to monitor rather than interrupt. Observation begins well before contact. Rangers watch how hikers move through Walter's Wiggles, how long they rest at Scout Lookout, and how they approach the permit boundary. Body language, pacing, and group spacing provide information without conversation. A hiker who pauses frequently, adjusts footing carefully, and maintains distance may not require engagement. Another who rushes, crowds others, or ignores footing cues may draw attention. Silence allows these patterns to become clear. Intervening too early can disrupt self-regulation. Rangers note that many hikers correct behavior after a brief pause, a change in weather, or observing others ahead. Speaking at that moment may override natural adjustment. By waiting, rangers allow hikers to reassess on their own. This approach is documented in training guidance, which emphasizes proportional response rather than constant direction. Silence is also used to manage flow. On narrow sections, verbal instructions can create hesitation or bottlenecks. Rangers record that excessive communication in constrained spaces increases congestion. Standing aside, maintaining eye contact, and allowing movement to continue often produces smoother passage than issuing commands. The absence of speech can be functional. Medical assessment sometimes begins without words. Rangers watch breathing patterns, posture, and coordination. These observations inform whether contact is needed. If a hiker stabilizes after resting, silence continues. If symptoms persist or worsen, engagement follows. The decision hinges on change over time rather than initial appearance. Weather monitoring involves similar restraint. Rangers observe cloud movement, wind shifts, and temperature changes. Only when trends indicate sustained change do they speak. This prevents warning fatigue. Visitors remain attentive because communication is infrequent and relevant. Permit enforcement also includes silent components. Rangers at Scout Lookout may simply stand near the boundary, visible but unobtrusive. This presence influences behavior without conversation. Hikers often check their permits or stop voluntarily. The boundary is maintained through awareness rather than constant dialogue. Silence plays a role in crowd psychology. Rangers note that authoritative silence can signal confidence and control. Over-explaining can invite debate or resistance. By limiting speech, rangers maintain neutrality. When they do speak, the message carries weight because it is not routine. There are moments when silence avoids escalation. Emotional responses from hikers, such as frustration or anxiety, can intensify if challenged verbally. Rangers document instances where stepping back and allowing space diffused tension. Intervention occurred later, once emotions settled. Silence acted as a buffer. Internal communication also includes selective silence. Rangers do not broadcast every observation over radio. Excessive traffic can obscure critical messages. By holding information until it is actionable, rangers keep channels clear. This discipline is reflected in dispatch logs that show concise, purposeful transmissions. Silence affects documentation as well. Not every observation becomes an entry. Rangers log contacts and incidents, not every moment of monitoring. This distinction keeps records focused on actions taken. Silence in documentation mirrors silence in the field, emphasizing relevance over completeness. Training reinforces this approach. New rangers learn to differentiate between presence and intervention. Exercises include scenarios where the correct response is to watch rather than act. These lessons are grounded in past incidents where premature involvement increased risk. Visitor expectations sometimes conflict with this practice. Some hikers expect guidance at every step. Rangers note that fulfilling this expectation is neither feasible nor desirable. The trail environment requires individual judgment. Silence respects that responsibility while preserving ranger capacity. Silence also protects ranger safety. Entering a situation verbally can commit a ranger to a course of action that increases exposure. By waiting, rangers retain flexibility. This is particularly relevant in exposed sections, where movement options are limited. The cumulative effect of silent decision-making is reflected in incident outcomes. Many potential issues resolve without recorded action. Rangers attribute this to timely observation and restraint. The absence of an incident does not appear in statistics, but it shapes daily operations. Silence is not universal. When thresholds are crossed, rangers speak clearly and directly. The contrast between silence and speech is intentional. It signals that conditions have changed. Visitors are more likely to respond when communication is distinct from routine presence. This approach aligns with the park's broader management philosophy. Zion does not aim to eliminate risk, but to manage it. Silence supports this balance by allowing natural limits to guide behavior until intervention is necessary. Rangers also rely on peer observation. Colleagues watch each other's interactions and non-interactions. Decisions to remain silent are discussed during debriefs, reinforcing shared understanding. This collective judgment reduces reliance on rigid rules. Over time, silence becomes part of the trail's rhythm. Visitors move, pause, and decide within an environment that is observed but not constantly directed. Rangers remain attentive, ready to act, but often choosing not to. This restraint is as intentional as any formal action. The effectiveness of silence is difficult to measure directly. It appears indirectly in the absence of escalation and the smooth flow of visitors. Rangers recognize its value through experience rather than metrics. Silence does not remove responsibility, it reallocates it. Rangers remain accountable for outcomes, even when they choose not to speak. This accountability reinforces careful observation and disciplined restraint. The role of silence is therefore operational, not philosophical. It is a tool used alongside communication, permits, and staffing. Its purpose is to maintain stability in a dynamic environment without unnecessary interference. How the trail's reputation changed inside the park. Within Zion National Park, perceptions of specific trails develop gradually through staff experience rather than public announcement. Angel's Landing did not acquire a distinct internal reputation through a single incident or policy change. Instead, its standing among rangers shifted over years of briefings, after-action notes, and routine conversations tied to daily work. This change occurred quietly, without altering the way the trail was presented to visitors. Early internal references to Angel's Landing framed it primarily as a popular destination with exposure challenges. Rangers assigned to Zion Canyon in the 1990s and early 2000s described it as demanding but manageable, similar to other high-use routes in the park. Incident logs from that period show a mix of minor injuries and occasional serious events, consistent with visitation levels at the time. The trail's internal profile was not exceptional. As visitation increased through the 2000s and 2010s, the nature of ranger interaction with the trail changed. More staff hours were dedicated to monitoring, and more briefings included updates related to the route. Rangers began to refer to Angel's Landing less as a scenic hike and more as a location requiring sustained attention. This shift was not codified in policy but emerged through repetition in operational context. Briefings are a primary mechanism through which internal perception evolves. At the start of each shift, supervisors outline expected conditions, staffing assignments, and known issues. Over time, Angel's Landing appeared more frequently in these discussions, even on days without active incidents. Mentions included crowd flow, weather sensitivity, and staffing placement. The frequency of reference reinforced the idea that the trail required ongoing consideration. Language used in these briefings remained neutral. There were no warnings framed as prohibitions or alarms. Instead, phrases such as "keep an eye on the landing" or "check conditions up high" became common. These statements conveyed priority without urgency. Newer staff absorbed these cues and incorporated them into their own assessments. Training materials also reflected this gradual change. While Angel's Landing was not singled out as uniquely dangerous, scenario-based exercises increasingly referenced it as a context for decision-making. Trainees practiced assessing congestion, managing permit checks, and coordinating responses in exposed terrain. The trail became a default example, not because of notoriety, but because of relevance. Informal conversations among rangers further shaped perception. During breaks or after shifts, staff shared observations about conditions, visitor behavior, and near misses. These discussions were factual and specific, focusing on what was seen rather than how it felt. Over time, a shared understanding developed that Angel's Landing demanded a different rhythm of attention compared to other trails. The introduction of the permit system formalized some of these internal concerns without explicitly naming them. While the public rationale centered on crowd management and safety, internally the permits were understood as a tool to stabilize workload. Rangers recognized that limiting numbers reduced unpredictable congestion, which had become a recurring challenge. The policy change validated existing perceptions without requiring them to be articulated. After permits were implemented, internal discussions shifted again. The trail was no longer described as uncontrolled, but it continued to occupy a prominent place in briefings. Rangers noted that while crowding decreased, the need for vigilance remained. The reputation evolved from one of volume-driven risk to one of condition-driven risk. Supervisory staff played a role in reinforcing this perspective. Assignment decisions often placed experienced rangers near Scout Lookout or along the West Rim during busy periods. This pattern signaled that the area warranted seasoned judgment. Newer rangers observed these placements and internalized their significance. Incident reviews further contributed to the trail's internal profile. After serious events, supervisors led debriefs focusing on response effectiveness and communication. Angel's Landing incidents were analyzed alongside others, but their complexity often required longer discussion. These reviews emphasized logistics and coordination rather than causation, reinforcing the idea that the trail presented operational challenges. The reputation also extended beyond field staff. Dispatchers, maintenance crews, and administrators became familiar with Angel's Landing as a recurring reference point. Radio traffic, equipment staging, and scheduling all reflected this familiarity. The trail's name appeared frequently in internal communications, not as a warning, but as a known variable. Despite these shifts, there was no internal directive to avoid the trail. Rangers continued to patrol, respond, and assist as needed. The change lay in mindset rather than access. Angel's Landing was approached with a higher baseline of awareness, informed by accumulated experience rather than fear or avoidance. Comparisons with other trails highlight this distinction. Routes with similar exposure but lower visitation did not generate the same level of internal discussion. Conversely, heavily used but less exposed trails produced different patterns of concern. Angel's Landing occupied a unique intersection of popularity, exposure, and logistical constraint. This internal reputation influenced subtle decisions. Rangers adjusted where they stood, when they checked permits, and how they phrased information. These choices were not documented as policy shifts, but were consistent across seasons. The trail's management evolved through practice rather than proclamation. Visitors were largely unaware of this change. From their perspective, the trail remained iconic and accessible within defined rules. The internal reassessment did not alter marketing materials or guidebook descriptions. The absence of public messaging about this shift was intentional. Sharing operational concerns publicly could create misinterpretation or unnecessary alarm. The park maintained its commitment to factual, measured communication. Over time, the trail's internal reputation stabilized. It was no longer viewed as an anomaly, but as a known quantity requiring consistent management. New incidents reinforced existing understanding rather than redefining it. The learning curve flattened as experience accumulated. This evolution demonstrates how institutional knowledge develops in practice-based environments. The trail did not change dramatically in form or location. What changed was the context in which it was understood by those responsible for it. That understanding guided daily decisions without requiring formal acknowledgement. The reputation continues to be refined. Each season adds new data, and each shift contributes observations. Rangers do not expect the trail to become simpler to manage. They expect to manage it with increasing clarity, informed by years of internal experience. Why avoidance is rarely written down. Inside Zion National Park, operational decisions are guided less by written instruction than by accumulated practice. Some of the most influential choices affecting ranger movement on the Angel's Landing route do not appear in policy documents, training manuals, or public-facing materials. They exist instead as habits shaped by experience, reinforced through daily briefings, and passed quietly between staff. These choices influence where rangers stand, how long they remain in certain locations, and when they decide not to enter a section of trail. Formal documentation focuses on action. Closures are recorded, permits are issued, rescues generate reports. What does not occur is harder to capture. When a ranger chooses to remain at scout lookout rather than walk the chains, there is no incident number. When staff decide that conditions do not justify presence on the spine, that decision leaves no trace unless something later happens. Avoidance, in this context, is the absence of movement rather than the presence of restriction. Rangers describe this pattern as resource management. Staffing levels in Zion Canyon are finite, and each ranger's position affects coverage elsewhere. Entering a constrained section of trail commits time and limits flexibility. Once on the spine, a ranger cannot easily reverse direction or respond to calls beyond that area. Choosing not to enter preserves options. This calculation is repeated daily, shaped by weather, visitation, and recent incidents. These decisions are rarely written because they change constantly. A section that is avoided during high winds may be entered freely the next morning. A crowded afternoon may discourage patrol beyond the permit boundary, while a quiet winter day invites closer inspection. Writing these choices into standing orders would require constant revision. Rangers instead rely on judgment informed by current conditions. Training reinforces this reliance on discretion. New rangers are taught where hazards exist, but they are also taught to assess whether presence improves safety in a given moment. Exercises emphasize evaluating benefit versus exposure. Avoidance is presented as one possible outcome, not as failure to act. The absence of movement can be as intentional as movement itself. Supervisors support this approach through assignment patterns. Rather than directing rangers to patrol every section equally, they assign positions that maximize visibility and response capacity. Scout lookout, junctions, and approach trails receive consistent coverage. This distribution is understood internally and does not require formal acknowledgement. Documentation practices reflect this focus on action. Reports capture contacts, assists, and incidents. They do not capture decisions to watch rather than intervene. Over time, this creates a record weighted toward activity. The quieter work of observation remains undocumented, even though it shapes outcomes. Avoidance is therefore invisible in the archive, despite its operational importance. Legal considerations also influence what is written. Documenting intentional avoidance of certain areas could be misinterpreted as negligence if taken out of context. Rangers and administrators are aware that written records persist beyond their original purpose. By framing decisions as situational rather than policy-driven, the park preserves flexibility while avoiding misrepresentation. Communication among staff fills the gap left by documentation. Rangers share observations during shift changes and informal conversations. Phrases such as, "No need to be up there right now," convey shared understanding without formalization. These exchanges are specific to time and place. They do not translate well into written guidance intended for broad application. The permit system altered but did not eliminate these unwritten practices. While permits regulate visitor numbers, they do not dictate ranger movement. Staff still decide when to enter or remain outside exposed sections. The system reduced congestion, making some entries easier, but it did not change the underlying calculus of risk and flexibility. Maintenance and technical staff follow similar patterns. Crews schedule work during low-use periods and avoid certain sections when conditions are unfavorable. These decisions are planned, but not framed as avoidance. They are described as timing considerations. The language remains neutral, focusing on efficiency rather than limitation. Visitors may assume that areas without ranger presence are unmonitored. In practice, observation often occurs from a distance. Rangers position themselves where they can see movement patterns and respond quickly. Physical absence does not equal lack of awareness. This distinction is not obvious to those on the trail, but it is central to how the route is managed. Avoidance also interacts with fatigue management. Rangers working exposed terrain expend physical and cognitive energy. Rotating positions and limiting unnecessary exposure helps sustain performance across long shifts. These considerations are discussed informally and reflected in assignment choices. They are rarely written because they depend on individual condition as much as terrain. Incident reviews occasionally reference these unwritten decisions indirectly. When a response is analyzed, supervisors may note that staff were well positioned or that entry was delayed until conditions improved. The focus remains on outcomes rather than on paths not taken. Avoidance remains implied rather than stated. The cumulative effect of these practices is a trail managed through presence and absence. Rangers are visible where visibility matters and absent where absence preserves capacity. This balance shifts continuously. Writing it down would freeze it in time, undermining its usefulness. Institutional memory sustains this system. Rangers learn from those who have worked the canyon longer. They absorb patterns through observation rather than instruction. This transfer of knowledge is subtle but persistent. It allows the park to adapt without formal restructuring. Avoidance is therefore not a secret or a policy. It is a consequence of working in constrained terrain with variable conditions. Rangers do not avoid the trail itself. They avoid unnecessary commitment when commitment offers no advantage. This distinction is understood internally and enacted daily. From the outside, Angel's Landing appears unchanged. The chains remain, the permits are issued, the trail is open. Internally, management continues to adjust through decisions that leave no written trace. These decisions shape safety outcomes as much as any posted rule. The absence of documentation does not mean the absence of intent. It reflects a system built on judgment rather than prescription. Rangers operate within guidelines, but rely on experience to decide when to act and when not to. Avoidance, in this sense, is a tool used quietly and deliberately. This approach allows the park to respond to change without constant revision of policy. Weather shifts, visitor behavior evolves, and conditions fluctuate. Unwritten decisions adapt faster than written ones. They remain flexible because they are not fixed. The result is a trail that continues to function under pressure. Management occurs through countless small choices, many of which are never recorded. Avoidance is one of those choices. It remains unwritten because it is inseparable from context, and context changes every day. If you want to understand how places like this are really managed, not through headlines or rumors, but through the quiet decisions that happen every day, stay with the channel. More breakdowns like this are coming, each one tracing how real environments shape real outcomes over time. Subscribe, and let the next one play when it appears.